If you're a Sigma male, you already know how rare it is to find a woman who actually fits the way you're wired. Not just someone attractive, not just someone who seems great on paper, but someone who actually matches the way you think, the way you move, the way you need things to be. And if you're honest, you've probably questioned yourself at some point. You've watched connections fall apart that seemed fine from the outside and wondered if maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're too selective. Maybe you expect too much. Maybe the way you're built just isn't compatible with what most women want from a relationship. But that's not it. The real issue is simpler and harder at the same time. The kind of woman who actually works for a Sigma is genuinely rare. Not because she has to be perfect, but because she has to be a very specific kind of real. Most women, without meaning to, create situations a Sigma simply won't stay in. So things end, or never fully start, and from the outside it looks like he's just impossible to reach. He's not. There is one type of woman who gets through, and she doesn't do it with looks. The looks don't hurt. She doesn't do it with status, with strategy, or with anything most dating advice would point you toward. What she does is something far quieter and far harder to find. Here are the 8 traits of the only woman who actually gets a Sigma male hooked. Number 1. She doesn't leave other men wondering if they have a chance. You've seen it before. You're out with a woman and she's friendly. Maybe a little too friendly. The guy at the bar gets a smile that lasts 2 seconds too long. The old friend who texts gets a reply that's warmer than it needs to be. Nothing you can point to directly, nothing you can call out without looking insecure. But you feel it. That low hum of uncertainty. That nagging question in the back of your mind. Does she actually want to be here, or is she keeping her options open? For most men, this is just part of dating. They learn to live with it, brush it off, pretend it doesn't bother them. But Sigma males are wired differently. They don't do uncertainty, they don't do guessing games, and they absolutely don't do situations where they have to compete for the attention of a woman they're already with. The moment that dynamic appears, the Sigma is already mentally halfway out the door. The woman who gets a Sigma hook never creates that kind of situation. She's naturally warm, naturally social, but there's a clarity about her that can't be faked. Other men know where they stand without her having to say a word. She doesn't flirt to feel good about herself. She doesn't leave conversations open-ended just to keep someone interested. She's not collecting admirers on the side as a backup plan. When she's with you, she's with you. Not performing loyalty, actually being loyal. And the difference between those two things is something a Sigma can feel from a mile away. It's not about control. It's not about possession. It's about respect. And a woman who respects both herself and the relationship enough to make her position clear, without being asked, without being told, is the kind of woman a Sigma male wants by his side. Number 2. She never turns private moments into public leverage. Every close relationship has moments that belong only to the two people inside it. Vulnerable things said at the wrong time. Fears shared without armor. Mistakes admitted without being asked. Those moments are given in trust, not as currency, and most people understand that instinctively. But some people, without even fully realizing it, file those moments away. And when things get tense, when an argument needs winning or a point needs making, those private things come back out in the worst possible way. Sigma males notice this pattern fast, sometimes before it even fully happens. A small comment in front of others that uses something personal. A joke that's a little too close to something real. A story shared with someone who didn't need to know it. None of these have to be enormous to land hard. Because the issue isn't the size of the breach. It's what the breach reveals about how that person sees the relationship. It reveals that closeness was being stored as ammunition. The woman who gets through to a Sigma is the one who never does this. Not because she's holding back, but because it genuinely doesn't occur to her to use someone's vulnerable moments as a tool. What's shared between them stays between them, in the easy moments and the difficult ones. And when things get hard between them, and they will get hard at some point, she fights fair. She speaks to the issue, not to the person's soft spots. That kind of safety is not something Sigma males talk about wanting, often because they haven't had it enough to name it. But when it shows up, when someone handles what they know about you with actual care, something shifts. The walls that were there for a reason start to feel less necessary. And for someone who keeps most people at a certain distance, choosing to close that gap is significant in a way that doesn't need to be explained out loud. Number 3. She doesn't make you pay twice for the same mistake. You had a bad moment. Maybe you said something you shouldn't have. Maybe you handled something poorly, and it got heated. Things were said, and then, the way things sometimes do when two people actually care, it ended. You both came back down. You understood what you did wrong. She understood. And you looked at each other and moved forward. Or so you thought. 8 months later, completely different argument, different topic, different day, and there it is again. That moment, those exact words, pulled out and placed on the table like they never left. And now you're not talking about what's actually in front of you anymore. You're back there, defending something that was already settled, something you both agreed to leave behind. Except apparently only one of you actually did. And then, while you're still processing that, another one surfaces. Something from even further back, also resolved, also supposedly behind you. And now, that's on the table too. And somewhere in that moment you start to realize that nothing was ever actually put away. It was all just set aside, stacked quietly out of sight, in the right order, waiting for the right moment. And the right moment is apparently whenever the current argument needs more force behind it. That is a specific kind of exhaustion that's almost impossible to describe to someone who hasn't felt it. Because you're not fighting one fight anymore. You're fighting all of them simultaneously. Every mistake, every heated moment, every bad day, still active, still available, still ready to be reintroduced at full volume. You need a full day just to recover from a single hour, not because you're weak, but because the weight of it was never meant to be carried all at once. And what makes it even harder is that most of the time she doesn't even know she's doing it. It's not a strategy she designed. It's just what happens when someone never fully lets things go. The mistakes don't disappear, they collect, quietly over months, over years. And one day you're deep into an argument and the person across from you is holding receipts from situations that were resolved so long ago you'd genuinely forgotten about them, using a version of you that no longer exists as evidence against the one standing right there. That level of drain doesn't belong in any relationship worth having. A Sigma sees it clearly, not because he's cold, but because he thinks in systems, and this one is broken by design. You cannot build anything real with someone who is quietly invoicing every mistake you've ever made. You cannot grow with someone who treats your worst moments as permanent character evidence. And you cannot move forward with someone who is, by definition, always pulling you backward. A Sigma doesn't have the patience for that. Not out of arrogance, but because he understands something most people take years to figure out. A mature woman, a woman who actually understands how life works, knows that when two people talk something through and get past it, that chapter is closed. Full stop. What was said was said. What was resolved was resolved. And neither of them gets to reopen it the next time things get heated. That's not a high standard. That's just basic emotional honesty. The woman who gets a Sigma's attention operates exactly that way. When something is finished between them, it's genuinely finished, not quietly archived for later use. She shows up to the current moment with her full attention on what's actually happening right now, and what's behind them stays behind them. Not because she has a short memory, but because she understands that a relationship where nothing ever truly closes isn't a relationship. It's a courtroom, and she has no interest in being the prosecutor. Number 4. She doesn't create problems just to test you. Some women, without always knowing they're doing it, simulate tension. They go quiet without explanation to see if you'll chase. They create situations designed to measure your reaction. They pull back at the exact moment things start to feel solid, just to see if you'll reach for them. And if you don't respond exactly right, that becomes information used against the relationship. This kind of testing tends to have a specific feel, a fake quality, like the problem appeared out of nowhere and doesn't quite connect to anything real. If there's one thing Sigma males can't stand, it's being tested through something that isn't even real. They're observational by nature, and something that's being staged reads differently from something that's actually happening. The issue isn't catching it, it's knowing what to do with it, because calling it out directly usually makes things worse, and playing along feels dishonest. What tends to happen is they disengage. Not dramatically, just enough to put distance between themselves and something that doesn't feel genuine. And because they don't explain the distance, the testing often increases, which pushes them further, and the whole thing spirals in a direction that has nothing to do with anything real. The woman a Sigma pays attention to doesn't need to test. When she has a concern, she raises it directly. When she needs something, she says so. She trusts the relationship enough to bring real things to it rather than faked ones, and she trusts herself enough to handle the real answers that come back. There's no performance happening, no scene being set up to measure a reaction. Just two people dealing with what's actually there. For someone who deals with fake behavior every day, that kind of realness almost makes him stop and question if it's even real. Number 5. She doesn't make honesty feel like a trap. There's a specific kind of question that sounds like it wants an answer, but is actually looking for a specific answer. And if you give the honest one instead, you pay for it, through silence, through a shift in mood, through a comment that comes 3 days later when you've already moved on. Most people learn to navigate this by becoming slightly less honest over time. They round the edges, leave things out, give the answer that keeps the peace. Sigma males are bad at that adjustment. They tend toward directness, and softening the truth to manage someone's reaction doesn't come naturally. So when they're with someone where honesty keeps going wrong, where saying what they actually think feels like something they have to brace for, they start to go quiet. Not out of dishonesty, but because the alternative keeps costing them something. The woman a Sigma actually opens up to is the one who wants the real answer, even when it's not the comfortable one. She asks because she wants to know, not because she's testing. And when the honest answer comes back, and it's not what she hoped to hear, she responds to what you said, not the fact that it wasn't what she wanted to hear. She can hold honesty without turning it into a problem. That's rarer than it sounds. Most women say they want honesty but have a threshold for it that's lower than they think. A Sigma wants a woman who knows her own threshold and works within it, instead of asking for the truth and then reacting to it like a threat. Sigma males don't want to feel like they have to filter themselves. They don't want to constantly calculate what's safe to say or hold back parts of their thinking just to avoid friction. What they want is the kind of connection where they can speak freely, and when that happens, they're a lot more present than most people ever experience. Number 6. She gives space without making it feel like distance. Most people understand what it means to give someone space, but understanding it and actually doing it are two very different things. Because some people give space with an energy attached to it, a quiet withdrawal, a coolness that wasn't there before, a sudden unavailability that feels less like freedom and more like punishment. And you're left trying to figure out if this is them being understanding or if something shifted that nobody told you about. That version of space doesn't feel like space. It feels like distance with no explanation, and it creates its own kind of pressure, the pressure of not knowing which one it actually is. Sigma males feel that distinction immediately. When someone pulls back in a way that carries weight to it, the question of what it means becomes its own problem to solve. And now, instead of having room to breathe, There's a new thing to figure out, a new temperature to read, a new gap to interpret. The space that was supposed to feel open now feels loaded. The woman who gets this right does something that sounds simple, but almost nobody actually manages. She gives space that feels clean. When he needs room, she doesn't match it with a coldness of her own. She stays warm, stays herself, stays present in the way that doesn't crowd him. And there's no atmosphere of consequence hanging over any of it. The space is just space. No hidden meaning, no score being kept, no shift in energy that requires reading. What that changes over time is the tone of the whole connection. Nothing gets complicated just because there's a bit of distance. There's no weird shift to read into. No sense that something needs to be fixed when nothing actually happened. Everything stays steady, the same before and after. And that kind of consistency is rare, because most people can't give space without changing how they show up. For a Sigma, that kind of maturity stands out more than anything. Not in a flashy way, just in how steady and grounded she is. Because a lot of people, without realizing it, slip into childish patterns when things don't go their way. And that never sits right with him. But she doesn't do that. She handles things like an adult, stays consistent, and that alone is enough to make her hard to overlook. Number 7. She doesn't make you earn basic respect. Respect that arrives with conditions attached isn't really respect. It's a reward system, and it requires constant performance to keep the rewards coming. Be available enough, be warm enough, be expressive enough, and you get treated well. Fall short of the unspoken standard, and something shifts until you correct it. Most people adjust to this system without realizing they've adjusted, because it creeps in slowly and feels almost normal by the time it's fully established. Sigma males resist this adjustment almost automatically. Acting a certain way just to get basic decency back is something they notice fast, and it doesn't sit right. It's not that they expect to be treated as exceptional. They don't need that. They just expect that the baseline of how they're treated doesn't fluctuate based on how well they're currently meeting someone else's expectations. A Sigma wants a woman who doesn't make basic respect something you have to earn. When she's frustrated, she addresses it directly, but she doesn't pull back basic warmth as a way to punish him. She separates her feelings about a specific situation from how she treats him as a person, and that line stays consistent. That consistency matters more than people think. He doesn't have to wonder if how she treats him tomorrow depends on whether he got everything right today. There's no walking on eggshells, no adjusting just to keep things smooth. And for someone who's used to reading the room all the time, not having to do that here changes the whole situation. Number 8. She doesn't try to turn you into someone else. Every Sigma male has felt this at some point. The slow, subtle pressure to be different. It doesn't always come as a direct demand. Sometimes it's a comment here, a suggestion there. You should be more social. You should talk more. You should want different things. You should be more like. And there's always a comparison somewhere, spoken or unspoken. Over time, the message becomes clear. Who you are isn't quite right. Who you are needs adjusting. Who you are is a project, not a person. Sigma males don't do projects. They are who they are, deliberately, consciously, and without apology. They've done the work, they know themselves, and they will not spend a relationship slowly erasing themselves to fit someone else's idea of what a man should look like. The woman who gets a Sigma hooked doesn't come with a renovation plan. She sees who he is, and she's here for exactly that. Not a future version she's hoping to create, not a potential she wants to unlock on her own terms, but him. Right now, as he is, she might challenge him. The right woman always does. But there's a fundamental difference between pushing someone to grow and trying to reshape them into something more comfortable, more familiar, more controllable. She knows the difference. She stays on the right side of it. What makes her different is how she approaches it. She's not trying to shape him into some ideal she already has in her head. Not an ex, not some perfect version she imagined years ago. Not a man who's easier to manage. Of course, people grow in a healthy relationship, that's normal. But growth happens naturally, not through quiet pressure or constant correction. She's there for who he actually is, not who she's hoping to turn him into. And that's exactly why she stands out without trying. And because of that, she gets to know someone very few people ever get to know. Who he actually is, underneath everything. That's the woman who gets a Sigma male hooked. Not by chasing him, not by playing games, not by trying to fix him. Just by being real, being solid, and being exactly who she says she is, every single day.